Helen here, and it's another episode of Conversations with Compassion. And if you're new to me, if you're new to Conversations with Compassion, I'm Helen Ferguson. I'm a trauma-informed therapist and emotional empowerment coach, and I help professional entrepreneurial women emotionally recover from trauma through self-compassion and self-acceptance, so that they can stand confidently in their self-belief and self-worth in their business, their relationships, and their life. And Conversations with Compassion came about by my passion for compassion, which is self-compassion as the healing journey for us. And so I wanted to bring conversations to the fore that destigmatized the idea that compassion and self-compassion is lazy, it's self-indulgent, it's, people don't have time for it. So this conversation these conversations are about saying they're not. Self-compassion is hugely empowering. And I'm really, really excited this morning that I have Bethan with us, and she's an incredible psychotherapist. And I'm going to let her introduce herself to you because she can do it better than I can. So Bethan, it's over to you.
Thank you. Your work sounds great. I've never heard you sort of do your bit where you fully explain who you are and what you do. So it's amazing. I thought I'm in. Sign me up. So where's the dotted line? So I'm Bethan. I live in Ireland. I'm a mom of 3 kids, aged 6, 8 and 10. And I am a psychotherapist specialising in parenting support. So I work with parents, mainly mums in business, to help them create emotional balance and also parent with peace of mind. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this. Are we allowed to swear? I mean,
I think we can. I've always said not to.
People say to me when they come to me, they're like, I just want to know I'm not fucking up my children's lives. And I'm like, great, have a seat and we'll sort it out. So that's what we do, really. And compassion comes into it in every way, because compassion for me is the part of us that helps us understand all the other parts. So compassion to me is like a character. We all have characters and profiles. I think especially in parenting, the characters we talk about are guilt, shame, overwhelm, anger, being stressed out, feeling anxious, feeling torn. But we also have this character called compassion, who for me is like an inner ally. It's like your best friend sitting inside of you that's actually you, and helps you come up with the answers and the solutions that you're looking for. So that's what we do. That's what I do. So yeah, that's it.
That's it. No, I was about to say, conversation of it. No. And what you do, what you do absolutely resonates with me, because in the past, as I think I still train foster carers now. I've worked with children and young people and their parents and their carers to respond to the emotional needs of children through playfulness, love, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, which is in itself embedded in compassion. So, every time I listen to you and read about your work, it's like, I get it. I absolutely get it. So I love the fact, how compassion means for you personally and professionally as well. And I know you've done extensive work around self-compassion and compassion, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I mean, so I think the thing for me, I've started to get feedback a little bit, so I'm just going to plug in my headphones. Is that okay?
It's okay. Yeah. I'm just going to see if we've got any comments while we're doing that.
I did a live this morning with my headphones plugged in, but I wasn't talking into my headphones. So give me 2 tips. Hello, Lizzie. Good morning.
We've got Lizzie joining. Good morning, Lizzie. How are you this morning?
Okay, so my headphones are in now. Now I need to turn down the volume because it's like crazy loud.
We can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, good. And I'm not like a foghorn. Okay, so the thing for me with parenting and compassion is this, though, is that, my experience personally and my experience professionally is that it's great to talk about things like curiosity and empathy and love and respect. But if you haven't learned them for yourself, or if you weren't shown them as a child, you can't really offer them to someone else. It's like I live in Ireland and the kids are learning Irish, which is Gaeilge, which is a different alphabet to the English alphabet. I often think of you because I know that you learned Greek, and I presume that's a different alphabet from when I
It
was in
is a
school at
completely
15
different
and what I
alphabet.
remember. Yeah, so to me, that's kind of what compassion is like. Compassion, it took me years to understand compassion, and I was like a trained therapist, whatever that means, you know. I think that just means that there's the openness and the willingness to go inwards and keep burrowing down. I don't think it really means there's any increased level of emotional stuff like on a higher level than other people, you know. And I think that's a misconception about therapists, you know, that they're always together and always with it. And it's like, well, no, I'm always trying. You know,
Always,
that's the
I
thing.
think we're always trying, every
Yeah,
single one of us.
always trying. So that is, so that's really my work with parents. It is that kind of thing of like, you know, if I'm talking to a parent about, well, how might you show empathy for a child? They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I so get that because I studied compassion for 2 years before I understood it. And this isn't in any, you know, I can talk about this without any badness towards my own mother and my own father because they were just repeating inherited parenting patterns that they received. You know, and my mum and dad were post-war babies. My dad's mum died when he was 5, and my mum's mum survived. They all survived the war, but her experience was very different. So my mum grew up as a post-war baby, and then you see what happens in parenting is that you go to parent from your own internal parenting default mode. But it, you know, my parenting default mode is very far removed from the 1950s and rations and people dying and war. You know, so I really had to totally change my internal compass for parenting. And for me, compassion was really the only way that helped me do that because it helped me understand the different characters that were running the show.
Do you remember the moment that you started to think in that way, that something, you know, that you needed to look into compassion and look into and research it and develop it more? Do you remember, was there a pivotal moment, or was it something that, you know, from a professional perspective and that personal story that you've shared that just drew you into it?
I think probably both. Like at the time I worked in addiction and homelessness and suicide and eating disorders, so it was really high-end mental health work, you know. But I think it was maybe more personally because I'd had my baby and I came home and I was totally exhausted. I had a horrible birth. I was like stitched and cut and
Gosh.
you name it, it was going on. And I found it very hard to create the relationship I thought I was going to create with my child. And of course, then I found out sort of later on through personal therapy and just researching like what the heck's going on is that what I'd done is I'd recreated my my early attachment with my mother. And that's what we do, you know, when a woman, and I can only talk about women in this situation because the men's experience is a little different. You know, when a woman has a baby, they recreate their attachments with their mother, you know. So we often, in therapy, and for me, myself as well, you know, it's like, how do I know that? It's because I trust my felt sense. I trust my felt sense of what feels right for me. And that's also the theory of human brain development. So I basically turned into a really horrible mum and I became very angry. And I started to have thoughts that my child didn't like me, which is like, I want to say it's crazy, but it's actually not crazy. It just happens.
Crazy, no.
Do you know, it's just part of life. It's like, you know, I'm a very good cook and I was going to say great gardener. I'll wind it back one step and say good gardener. And it's taken me it's taken me 4 years to get a garden that can produce vegetables enough for us to eat as a family. But it's like parenting, right? It takes a while to figure out who you are, what needs to be cultivated in what way, how much water to give it, how much food to give it, how much to think about it, how much to trim it back, and you know, all of that stuff. So, and I also made the mistake, and I think many parents make this mistake totally unwittingly, in thinking that it's their children who have to change. So I kind of thought that this 18-month-old child, he had to change. He was the problem. He wasn't listening. He wouldn't do what I wanted him to do, and he was angry. But I, of course, didn't realise that this little person was simply reflecting back me. And it was how I responded to him that made the real change in his life. And when I learned compassion, when I learned to understand why I turned into this very angry person who felt like they couldn't cope, then it allowed me to start a relationship with my child. So that's that in a nutshell.
It's you know, it's a huge shift, isn't it? Because I think, you know, I'm not a mum, okay, but you know, I've worked now with a lot of mums, and kind of, you know, it's really interesting. You know, some of the women that I work with, of course, they're entrepreneurial, they're professional, they're high achieving, they're really driven, and that, you know, they have their children, or they've had their children. They're all different ages, but they forget that experience of, you know, whilst it's a really, you know, can be really exciting experience, it's a wonderful experience, but it can also be very traumatic in the sense that it's this huge change. It's a, you know, there's then this kind of trauma response to this massive change and transition that then has to happen, and this new identity that has to be formed, that means that you're there for this little bundle that is then going to rely on you for a great number of years. And where am I is often the phrase I hear. Where am I in that? You know, where am I? And I said, well, that's where compassion, that's where self-compassion comes in, because you can't be for others unless you can be for yourself. Yeah. And so the amount of resistance I've had, this is why I said at the beginning, the things that I often hear is, I'm too busy, self-compassion is self-indulgent, it's lazy, what's the point?
I often get that it's weak, you know, that it's weak, that it's kind of like, oh God, I don't want to be weak, but actually it's real strength. You know, it's like the ultimate strength without having to be like, you know, like a bodybuilder strength. You know, it's like the opposite of that. It's the inner foundation that will get you through everything.
Yeah.
You know? And
you and I, you know, before, you know, when we've spoken before, we talked about it as an emotional language, and especially with children, it's you know, it's an emotional language of self-compassion and compassion towards that your child and your family. Which is a really interesting and often difficult concept for some people to get their minds around and frame it for them in a different way.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also compassion stops us saying things that we don't want to say. You know, so in that moment when you're just so exhausted, like we've just come back from holiday. I mean, I say holiday, and, you know, like the kids were up till midnight and all the rest of it. But like, you know, I'm a parent, I could have easily stopped that, but we wanted to do it, you know, but it means that I brought 3 very tired kids home from holiday. And, you know, when kids are tired, they don't really sleep. You say, why don't you go to sleep? And they're like, I don't want to sleep. You're like, okay. And, you know, in those moments where you're getting sensory overwhelmed or you're exhausted, compassion is the language to resolve all that, because it stops you saying stuff like, oh, just shut up or go away or whatever it is that your angry response is, right? Compassion will always help you say something a bit more helpful. And I think as well, like I was chatting to an actress yesterday, a local lady in Ireland called Norma Sheehan, and she was saying that she uses her acting skills to help her in parenting. And that is also for me what compassion is. It's kind of this like, it's not fake it till you make it. It's act it until you become it. You know, yes. So if you can act, because that rewires the brain. You know, like I know that you said you don't have kids, but you're still a person who has received attachment. You know, and I think that's it. So, you know, you've received and you give out attachment.
Exactly.
And I think it is, you know, our attachments really have such a huge predisposition on how our brain works, but they're just wires that are fused together in a certain way. So if you can act it until you become it, and that's what compassion is for me. It helps me soften my body I used to do this exercise when I walked up the stairs every night with the kids. Like, I was crazy, and I had 3 kids under 3, and one of my kids was unwell, and the youngest boy was really unwell. So he cried for about 18 hours a day for 2 years. I mean, he cried and he cried and cried. And then we found out there was something wrong with him. So we, but so it would get to 6:30, 7 at night, and I'd been up for, 15 hours or something mad like that. And I would go upstairs and I could feel the tension in my body. And we've got about 15 steps. And every time I walked up the stairs, I did it with my eyes closed, and I didn't never dropped a child or fell. I mean, it sounds very dangerous when I say it now. But I used to soften my face, and I used to smile a little bit, and I used to soften my shoulders, and I just used to imagine that my best friend Angela was at the top of the stairs saying, "You can do it, Bethan." And that was it. That helped my brain segue into this really helpful place, rather than the kind of like, oh my fucking God, how am I going to get the kids to sleep? I've got him hanging off my tits, and who's going to do this, and who's that? Do you know? Like all the stuff. So compassion helps.
And you're, listening to you, kind of saying about the practicing, and a lot of what I help women to do is that visualization that you've just described for yourself, that ability to, look at the self-critical thoughts, the things that could take over, the tone of their voice in their heads, and visualize and do so. I help them to activate that self-soothe system, that place that just allows you to connect, that you're not on that high alert all the time. You can self-soothe, you can activate that self-soothe system, and we do a visualization work, and sometimes that's together, sometimes I say to them, do that yourself at home, just do it, find it, and it's amazing what comes back. It's absolutely incredible what comes back, and this ability to see themselves differently and feel themselves just release that tension, respond in a different way, because it's that pause in between that reaction and response, the pause in between that allows compassion in, and if you don't use that pause, you can stay in reactive mode, high alert, oh gosh, something bad's going to happen, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and then if you don't use that pause, if you use that pause, you can then respond to yourself and everything around you differently.
I have to write that down. Although I've heard this a million times, just sometimes when someone says something that really resonates, so give me 2 tips. But I think you're totally, right, there we go. My memory isn't the best, I'm just mum with the kids and stuff, and that's just something, in the mornings I've started to get up and go for a walk at 6, and that'll just be a lovely thing to mull over in my mind, sometimes I'd like to pick a little topic, what will I think about today for my hour walk? But I think you're totally right, and I think the other thing is that, like, I've got very good at self-compassion now. I could do it in a matter of seconds. It doesn't have to be this kind of thing that I have to practice for 10 minutes a day anymore. It's just like a thing. But I have lots of visual reminders around the house of things to remind me. So, like, I spend a lot of time at the kitchen sink doing the dishes. Sounds very stereotypical, but I do. And the kitchen is where we hang out a lot as well. So I have my pictures there of my friends, and every time I look at them, it takes my brain into that place of feeling cared for and cared about. So that's a very different place to being totally overwhelmed and dysregulated from the noise of the kids having a football match and a fight and doing TikTok in the corner and whatever else is going on.
All the stuff that's doing that.
And I think you make a great point about the visualization, because it's like, what we imagine has the same impact as if something is really happening. And that's so important to remember, because people say, oh, I just have to imagine it. And I say, yeah, but it's really powerful, because it'll override the system that's currently going on in your brain.
Exactly.
Sure,
And you were right with your terminology before. You're rewiring your brain. You know, you're rewiring the response. And it's incredibly empowering. And I was working with a lady recently who was really resistant. I'm not going to lie. She was she knew, you know, she came to me because she knew that she needed the work. You know, she was ready to invest in herself. She was ready to recognize, because a lot of the women that I work with, often it takes a while for them to recognize that they're in need of that support, because they're so busy, focused on their business, focused on their family, focused on the things that they're trying to achieve. So it takes a while for them to notice themselves and kind of go, oh, hang on, you know, this, and it's often the point at which they've reached overwhelm that they then connect with me. But she was kind of really resistant. And I often find that in session 2 or 3. Session 2 or 3, that's when the resistance happens, because it's like, why am I doing self-compassion? What's this about? And that's where the resistance comes from. That's where I hear all the statements of, you know, it's self-indulgent. It's what, you know, what's this going to do for me? You know, but she was kind of quietly resistant for about 6 sessions. I only work with women for 3 months. I don't. I have a specific program, and they don't need to work with me beyond that. But she was kind of halfway through when all of a sudden that resistance slightly shifted, and she just messaged me with this statement, and I'm going to swear now, because she just said, "This self-compassion stuff is the shit." She said, "It's powerful," and I went, "It is." You know, and it took her a while, and she's just said, "I get it. I get it now," and she's been able to kind of shift around some of her thinking now. So it is incredibly powerful, and especially, like you say, those moments where you can be with yourself, even when there's chaos around. You know, even in the mundane tasks, you know, that you can connect with yourself in that compassionate way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the resistance is like the nuts and bolts of it, isn't it? Because, you know, most of us have had a lifetime of not being treated with compassion.
Yeah.
So to suddenly try and let that in, it's really like, you know, you've got to chip away at like I play this game with the kids. It's going to sound like mad now that I think about it. But whenever we go swimming, I play this game that I lock them up. It sounds awful. But I pretend that I get a belt and I tie them to the side of the pool. This is the youngest boy now. And then I put a glass shield around them and then a wall, and he's to break out and escape. I mean, sounds a lot less weird when you're doing it. But that's like what compassion is, right? It's like breaking through the wall and the glass and the locks and the everything. Because it's okay to be human, right? And that's the thing that, you know, most people say, like in my membership, that's what they really struggle with, is all the feelings they've had that were never ever validated. And I think the thing about parenting is parents think that they have to come up with a solution, but it's actually like they are the solution, right? And all you have to do is be there. You don't have to do more than that. You know, sitting with your child in their emotions is enough. You know, because emotions are like a roller coaster for children. They go up and they go down. And, you know, I know that, say, perhaps the teenagers, they might need a bit more guidance, or they might not need more guidance. You know, it sort of depends. But if you can just be there, you know, but just being there with your kids takes a hell of a lot of work, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, especially if the children are in pain, you know, if they're going through their own emotional turmoil too, you know, in the sense of any trauma or previous abuse, for example. But obviously in this circumstance, we're just talking generally. But you know, it's often the thing, you know, that like you say, that I hear too, is kind of how do I sit with them? How do I want to make it better? I want to solve the problem. And I, you know, like you, I say to them, you're not necessarily there to solve it. Just be with it. And
kids come up with great solutions.
Yeah.
Do you know, like even yesterday, I mean, this is a small thing, but we just had come back from holiday the day before, so we hadn't got any milk. And the 10-year-old was like, "Oh, what will I have for breakfast?" I said, "I don't know. Just walk around and see what you see." And he made this like really tasty chicken sandwich. I was like, "Wow, that is delicious looking," And I think, you see, the more that we can get children to problem solve, the more, like I used to work in suicide prevention services. Like, there was one specific service I worked in, and I always think, everyone I met had just forgotten to problem solve. They just had forgotten how to get out of this emotional funk that they were in. And yes, there could be loads of trauma and abuse, and so there was like a dual level thing going on. There's the long-term work, and then there was the here and now work. And that's the piece that parents and compassion can really help with. Because compassion made me not go and get him a sandwich. Compassion made me not sort of give out to him because I was really tired and I didn't know what else to eat. And I couldn't be bothered to get milk, if I'm totally honest. But, because the compassion sort of kept it all in a container where he was delighted that he got the last bird roll in. Got to make a chicken sandwich.
And make a delicious chicken sandwich.
Yeah, but it's the same with emotions as well. Like, I know he came back from football really sad one day because he just felt he wasn't part of the team, and we made loads of tea. We didn't make tea because it's late at night. We made loads of toast, and we just sat, and he cried, and it was like a week after his 10th birthday, and I was like, "Oh, this is it. He's like really discovering the world." But sure, like, I couldn't tell his trainer to make all the boys be nice to him, because that wasn't what was happening at all. He just needs to find his way. But compassion made me sit there and be aware that I was triggered, right? We're all human and want to just be like, "Oh my God, that's it, I'll join the team as well." It's like, and then the next day he went back to training and everything was fine. So if you give kids that space and be your compassionate best, that's all you need.
Yeah. It's amazing that it can feel that simple, because often you look for the complicated, but it's
and I think the other thing that parents look for as well, in my experience, is, like you said, like, they look for the solution. So they're like, "What book can I buy? What activity book can I buy? Do I need to do mindful colouring? Do I need to do this, that, and the other?" And I say to people, "Look, do what works, but you don't need stuff. Your child isn't looking for like a workbook on how we can work through our emotions," in my experience. You as the parent might have to work through yours, but children just need you to sit there, And I know that there are, different situations of abuse or trauma, and they need a different kind of work. But
it's a different kind,
Yeah, I guess this chat's different.
Yeah, I mean, because the parents and the carers that I've worked with in the past, it's been children who have been traumatized and abused, and so that's a different way of responding, but there's still compassion. And one of the things that I teach when I'm coming over to the UK to teach in September, is around that compassion fatigue that can happen.
Remind me what compassion fatigue is again. I'm not very good with the words, you see. I'm one of these therapists. I'm not very technical. I really am great at the feeling bit and the process bit. So compassion fatigue, is that when you get really tired of minding other people?
Yes, generally.
Okay.
Yeah. And with foster carers and prospective adoptive parents and supervising social workers, those are the people that I teach. And I train them in particular emotional responses to children who've been traumatized and abused. So, often even in the room, it's kind of palpable in the room. I mean, usually there's around 30 carers and parents, and I can feel the energy of those people, the compassion fatigue is already there. They've got into that overwhelm. They've got into there's their own history that they haven't processed, which is impacting on their ability to provide compassion. But also with those children, it's also when they're providing the compassion and it's getting ostensibly thrown back in their face. That's what the phrase I hear quite a lot. It's being thrown back in my face. And I say, well, hang on, you're speaking a different language to them. These are children that have never experienced love, compassion, empathy, warmth, safety, nurture, you know.
And isn't it funny how like the carers kind of make it about them?
Yes.
You know, they say, but you're doing this to me.
Yeah.
There's just a thing that's happening, but people take it on the defensive.
Yeah.
You know, like this is targeting me.
It's targeting me, yeah. And I say to them, it's not about you.
Yeah.
You have to remember that you're speaking this different language to them, that they've come to a different country. Your home is a different country to them.
Yeah.
Different culture, different country, different ways of being, different food, different language, different connection. And you know, and they kind of go, oh right, okay, you know, we start to do this whole piece of work around it. But you know, with children generally, and you know, I've worked the work that I do with women now, you know, they often do have children, and so they ask me about, well, you know, my son's going through this at the moment, and he's doing that, and you know, how should I be? And I said, well, you know, be compassionate.
Yeah.
You know,
how do you want to be?
How do you want to be? Don't overanalyze. You know, there's this sense of needing to overanalyze. Well, why, you know, and I do, like you said, I get the messages, right, there's this book and this workbook, and should I get that for them? And I say no. You know,
take just a walk.
Stay with them, be with them, connect with them, listen. You know, listen, but also hear. Don't just listen. You know, just hear as well. And it's really, you know, it's really interesting the response I get. They're kind of like, oh well, I thought I needed to do something a bit more complicated. No, really not. Generally, just being with children and listening and being compassionate is what they need. And they learn from that too.
Yeah.
Because they can direct it towards others.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's like the trickle-down effect.
Bethan, I'm sorry.
No, it's lovely. But it is the trickle-down effect, isn't it? I guess what I was thinking of as you were talking then is about the being with children, because a message that I always receive from parents and we talk about is this kind of, and I don't know when it started in life or society. I think it's maybe since mums did get permission from society, I don't know, to work and be a mother. So people say to me, well, you know, and let me try and phrase it right, sorry, you know, how many hours a day do I need to be with my child? And I say, well, you know, because I meet all different kinds of parents, and I'm never here to say what's right or wrong. My work is to help mums figure out what works for you. And you see, the thing to remember is the quality of the engagement, which makes it sound really clinical. But it's like if your child goes to childcare at 7 in the morning and you collect them at 6 at night and you have an hour in the day, you know, can you enjoy that time? I know when kids come out of childcare, they're like can be demented and really exhausted. But it's kind of, you know, but that's okay. It's like, how do you connect with the child when they're in that space? You know, can you just love them through it compassionately and be like, I know you're really tired and, you know, I'll read a book and go to bed or whatever it is. So I think this idea of being with children, because I meet a lot of mums who are very fused to their children. You know, so life is very enmeshed. You know, they sleep together, they do everything together. And my experience is that isn't helpful, because at around the age of 2, children need to break away and they need to differentiate and they need to become themselves. And that's like a rough gauge, you know. But so there's being with children, and I know you said this at the beginning, but it's about the how. It's about how are you being with your child? You know, is it this really intense, well, because I felt like my mum wasn't there for me, you're there all the time with them? Because that's smothering. You know, or are you with them in that kind of slightly more detached, but not like abandoning them way, but you're there, but you don't have to be together all the time way. And this is like the nuances of it, right? And this is what compassion will help you understand. Because the fear will want you enmeshed, but the bit that can help you see what's going on will allow for this differentiation. And it's like, you know, families just happen to be different people living in the same household. And that's it. It doesn't have to be all matching pajamas and, you know, all the rest of it, right? It's like everything else apart from that.
It absolutely. It's and like you say, just reduce the complexity. It doesn't have to be complex. Just how it is just being you, and bringing yourself into that relationship in a compassionate way.
That's it.
But the overthinking and the overanalyzing and the overcomplicating it actually becomes a block.
Yeah, and like everyone does it,
Oh yeah,
it's like I still catch myself doing it, and then I'm like, what am I doing?
Beth and I do it with my dogs.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on the dogs. Yeah, my dog had a really upset stomach. My second dog, we had a dog that we were minding for a charity, like puppy socialising for a year. So this beautiful black Labrador was with us for about a year and a half. And God, like I thought about him all the time, because he was worth a lot of money because of his breeding and his training and what he was going to do now. He's worth about 15,000 euros. And I always thought, like, what if I lose him? Stranger things have happened, right? We live in the countryside, and he did used to take himself for a walk sometimes. So it's very hard. It's like, everything is a double-edged sword. I can plan, I can do so many things, but on the other side of that, I can also keep thinking about stuff that doesn't serve me very well, and that's where compassion kind of can cut through the crap,
Compassion cuts through the crap. There you go.
There's a t-shirt in that, isn't there?
I'm gonna get a mug made of it. Compassion.
And when you sit and do your lives,
See that on every
live. No. The face of compassion, Helen
I'll have two made, Beth, and then send you one.
Oh, I'd love that.
I'm going to do it. I am going to do it. Compassion cuts through the crap.
Thank you very much. I love it.
I think that actually, however, I think that's a fantastic way to end this conversation, is to say compassion cuts through the crap. But also, obviously, do you, if anybody, I mean, I know that people are still watching. I can see people are still watching. Is there one? You've given so much information throughout this, and so many kind of tips and guidance, actually, without actually calling them that. But if somebody's kind of in a resistant block right now about, kind of hearing that, is there? I mean, I know that I'd have loads of things to say, top tips. But how would you say that parents should start? If they're wanting to take the first kind of step out of that resistance, out of that mindset that says it's lazy, it's not, they're too busy, the kids are overwhelming. What would you say is a first step for them?
Well, I'd ask them, how is it serving them? Mm-hmm. I'd say, someone came to me and they were totally overwhelmed, and they were like, well, what is compassion going to do for me? I'd say, well, how is it serving you to not be compassionate? How does it serve you when you're staying in the place you are at the moment? And people usually say, well, it doesn't really. I'm not a nice mom, or I'm not enjoying life, I'm not enjoying my kids, I don't like to have to calm. And I think also, I say, okay, well, why don't we try? And the good thing about the compassion work is that it starts with the imagination, so you don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe it. Like, I hate affirmations. I can't stand them, because it's this whole, look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm a strong, beautiful woman. And, whilst fundamentally I do believe that,
Do you believe it? Yeah.
If you don't believe it, it doesn't mean shit. So I say, okay, and it's okay to be resistant. Sure, isn't that what life is all about? It's the resistances, But then I say, well, your internal world is the internal world of your children. We live in a system where what one feels, everybody feels. So if you are okay, and this isn't me like whacking on the guilt, this is just like the theory of life, right?
The theory of life, yeah.
Yeah, if you're okay with your children feeling how you feel on the inside, okay. But if you would like something to change, and if you are ready for life to be easier, come on board and see what it's all about.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that, Bethan, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time this morning to...
Well, thank you. Well, sure, I've got kids growing up since To your end, I haven't really. And thank you for the pause and not react. Whilst I knew that, I think I'd forgotten it. And
I think
honestly, the women who work with you are like, they're so blessed that you've all found each other. You know, it's always like, you know, as a therapist, I think sometimes there can be a bit of a pedestal thing, which makes me feel a bit icky. But it's
yeah,
almost like, you know, it's this kind of mutually beneficial, right? Everyone's healing together. It's just that you and
exactly.
me are maybe a few more steps ahead, you
Mhm.
know? And
I
that's it.
always so I always say to people that I'm not sitting in an ivory tower. You know, I've had to
Mm,
find compassion myself. You know, I've had things
yeah.
to me that I've needed to find compassion around.
Mm,
You know, and recognizing that, you know, when I was burnt out, when I worked in the management side of the NHS,
mm,
that and I left. I made the decision to leave. Well, huge
mm,
step to kind of leave
yeah.
that position. But you know, I realized what I'd been missing was compassion in that environment, but also the ability to provide self-compassion to myself. So I always
Yeah.
say, I don't sit in an ivory tower of, oh, I know this and I know this. No, I've felt it, you know.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? You know, but that's, I think, when you know you've found a great therapist, you
Yeah,
know, someone who's prepared to hold their hand up and say, I do the therapy work because it keeps me moving forward, you
yeah,
know? And
exactly.
that's it, you know?
It is all about moving forward.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for having
Oh,
me
thank
as
you.
well.
Bethan, how I will put the links because I've got them, but for any, I
Yeah.
know that I mean Loretta was here with us. She says thank you, ladies, and Lizzie
Oh.
says thank you. Have a wonderful day. But how do people connect with you if they want to find out more about you? How they, you know, any of the resources, the free resources that you have that they can connect with, or you know, you know, any of the groups that you have. How would they do
Yeah.
that?
Go to my website, BethanO'Riordan.com. I guess the spelling you'll put somewhere because my name's like almost
I'll
like
put
the
the
Greek
link.
language to spell, and or the Gaelga language. So yeah, on my website everything is there. But I have my free Facebook group, but I have my free downloadable 5 steps to calmer parenting that seems to really help people as well. It's kind of like it just takes people through 5 simple steps to removing themselves from the stuff that's going on in their lives and just being a bit of a bystander and being able to look inwards and make the
Brilliant.
changes. So that's me. Thank you.
I will put the links because I have them. You sent them to me, so I will put the links in the comments as well. Mandy's also saying thank you, ladies. So we've had Mandy, Lizzie, Loretta, and I know there's some others that haven't commented, but they've been here with us, and it's been fantastic, Beth. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time
Very
out.
good. That's all right. And we'll start with mugs and we'll get tattoos in a
We'll
few
start with
years.
mugs and then a tattoo, and a t-shirt. I
A
think, you
t-shirt.
know.
I'll have to copyright it quickly. Oh, so funny,
Do
isn't
you
it?
know, do you know, I might have to. I might have to. I can feel the, I can feel the merchandise coming on as
The
we
merch.
speak. But
Amazing,
let
amazing.
end again with saying compassion cuts through the crap. And thank you, Bethan. You're a star for spending time with me this morning, and
Thank
I always
you.
love talking to you. It's brilliant.
You too. Talk to you soon, Helen. All right.
I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.